In this series, we explore lesser known and interesting tidbits and trivia about the game. First off, let's go over no Murlocs on the Dragon Isles. One of the most iconic creatures in all of WoW are the Murlocs. These fishy humanoids that are native to Azeroth have long been a fan favorite, and there are numerous pets, toys, costumes, and even mounts with Murlocs in the game. Their cries of Murgle Murgle can often be heard in tons of zones, and they're usually a staple of questing. One part of the popularity is simply due to the fact that they can be found almost anywhere in WoW. In fact, they can be found on any continent on Azeroth, with the exception of the Dragon Isle. That's right, so far in Dragonflight there has not been a single Murloc anywhere to be sighted on the Dragon Isles. There are many quests in the Eastern Kingdom, Kalimdor, Northrend, Kul Tiras, and Zandalar which focus on Murlocs, and even the Broken Isles had a few fell Murlocs in the Broken Shore. Pandaria technically does have Murlocs since there are baby Murlocs to be found in the far east of the Krasarang Wilds. Murlocs can even be found in Outland as well, even though they're not native there. While never explained in the game, it can be presumed that the Naga brought the Murlocs to Outland with them when they traveled with Lady Vash under orders of Illidan. And of course there are no Murlocs in alternate Draenor since Murlocs not evolved there. While the Dragon Isles do have Gorloks in the Waking Shore, the Unaran Plains, and the Azure Span, these slimy creatures are the predecessors to the Murlocs and not actual Murlocs themselves. Gorloks do come with their own haunting sounds and have so far only really been featured on the continent of Northrend. Both Murlocs and Gorloks use the same language named Nurglish, which is further proof they're closely related. Another interesting fact is that the Makrura, which are the lobster and crayfish-like sea creatures, also share the same language of Nurglish. Jaina Proudmoore is one of the central figures to Warcraft's lore and story, so it's no surprise that she would appear in dungeons and instances, either as a boss or NPC. But Jaina takes the cake at being in a total of 15 dungeons and raids, the most of any character in all of WoW. Out of these appearances, she only serves as a boss twice, and an NPC for the other 13 times. We'll go over these dungeons and raids per expansion and briefly mention her role in each of them. Jaina's first appearance in WoW is from the Battle for Mount Hyjal raid. In this raid from the Burning Crusade expansion, players go back in time to the events of the Third War in Warcraft 3. This raid is unique in the fact that there's no real reason as to why players are here, other than the use of Bronze Dragonflight time magic. The devs just wanted players to be able to roughly relive the Warcraft 3 end battle in WoW and loot, quote, fat purples. In the Battle for Mount Hyjal raid, Jaina serves as the central leader during the first 6 waves of the instances and the 2 bosses. Perhaps the Battle for Mount Hyjal is one of the least liked raids in the entire game due to its long and holdout nature, and the fact that defeating enemies in the raid is the only significant way to gain reputation with the Scale of the Sands. In fact, the Battle for Mount Hyjal actually made it onto our video of the top 10 least good raids in all of WoW. The next time Jaina makes an appearance in an instance is in the dungeon Colin of Strathholm. In this dungeon, players help the Bronze Dragonflight to restore the Time Waves which have been corrupted by the Infinite Dragonflight. Chronologically, this is the first time in Jaina's life story that she is featured in an instance, since the events of Battle for Mount Hyjal are at the end of Warcraft 3, whereas the Colin of Strathholm is at the beginning of the game. Added in Wrath of the Lich King's expansion, the Colin of Strathholm dungeon gives the players a first-hand view of the moment in history in which Arthas kills an entire city of innocent civilians out of mercy and to stop the contagion of the undead from spreading further. Outside the city gates, Jaina says her infamous line, "I'm sorry Arthas, I can't watch you do this," before she turns and leaves. This decision would later haunt her life, such as in the Realm of Torment cinematic from the Battle for Azeroth expansion, when she says, "I should have stopped him. He never would have turned, he'd still be alive." Jaina's first true appearance in an instance in the game aside from the Bronze Dragonflight shenanigans is also in Wrath in the dungeon Trial of the Champion and the raids Trial of the Crusader and Trial of the Grand Crusader. In this dungeon, Jaina can be seen alongside King Varian Wrynn in the stands surrounding the Argent Tournament as the forces of Azeroth prepare to march upon Icecrown Citadel and the seat of the Lich King's power. Although Jaina has no lines in any of the 3 instances, her NPC model is there, so we will count it. Jaina's next 3 appearances are in the dungeons leading up to ICC. The Forge of Souls, the Pit of Saren, and the Halls of Reflection all feature Alliance players searching and aiding Jaina as she tries to enter the Citadel by herself. For Horde players, Sylvanas instead of Jaina leads them through these 3 dungeons. Both characters have a heavy story involvement with Arthas, and these 3 dungeons help explain and develop their arcs. The Halls of Reflection dungeon is particularly notable because its final boss is not really a boss and more of a run away from Arthas before he kills you fight. This dungeon even makes an appearance in our video Top 10 Best Dungeons in WoW. Jaina's last appearance in Wrath is in the Icecrown Citadel raid during the Sourfang After Fight RP scene. This makes Jaina have a total of 7 appearances in Wrath instances, although she only appears in 3 for Horde players, since Sylvanas takes her place in the Forge of Souls, Pit of Sauron, and Halls of Reflection, and Sourfang takes her place in ICC. Jaina makes only 1 appearance as a boss in Cataclysm, and even then, this could be debated. In the End-Time dungeon located in the Caverns of Time, players defeat an echo of Jaina in a warped and twisted future brought on by the evil dragon Murlocs, who was Nosdormu after he's fallen to the old god's corruption. First, this is not technically Jaina, only a residual fragment of her left over in this post-apocalyptic world after the Hour of Twilight. All of this is to say that this version of Jaina does not actually exist in our timeline and is therefore not entirely real. Regardless, we'll still count her as a boss in this instance and add it to the running total. It is also worth noting this is the third time Jaina makes an appearance in a dungeon or raid because of Bronze Dragon time shenanigans. Now we move on to WoW's fourth expansion, Mist of Pandaria. In MoP, Jaina only makes an appearance in one instance, which is the Siege of Orgrimmar raid. Actually, Jaina makes two appearances in this famous raid. Her first appearance is after players defeat the Shaw of Pride under the Veil of Eternal Blossoms, after which she opens a teleport to Orgrimmar for Alliance players. Jaina makes a second appearance again at the very end of the raid after Garrosh has been defeated and all the major faction leaders are standing around. This is right after the raid ending cinematic when Jaina tells Varian to, quote, dismantle the Horde. Jaina's next appearance in instance is not until after the Battle for Azeroth expansion, in which she has 3 appearances in different instances. Her first appearance is in the Siege of Borealis dungeon, in which she appears briefly at the end of the dungeon to teleport players out. The next 2 times Jaina makes appearances in BFA are in raids. Notably, Jaina serves as the final boss of the Battle for Dazara lore raid, with a chance of dropping the Glacial Tidestorm mount. This is arguably the second time Jaina has been a boss in the game, with her first appearance as a boss being an echo of herself in the End-Time dungeon mentioned earlier. Jaina also plays a prominent role in the fight against Azshara in the Eternal Palace raid. Jaina continues to lend a helping hand to players twice in 2 different raids from the Shadowlands expansion. In both the Sanctum of Domination and the Sepulchre are the first ones, Jaina and Thrall serve as guiding NPCs as they help players overcome Sylvanas and the Jailer. So, there you have it. Jaina has been in a total of 15 instances so far in WoW. 1 appearance in TBC, 7 in Wrath, 1 in Kata, 1 in MoP, 3 in BFA, and 2 in Shadowlands. Those numbers can be a bit altered if you count not seeing her as Horde in some Wrath instances, and whether or not it truly is Jaina as a boss in the End Time. Additionally, Jaina will also probably have some roles in future raids and dungeons as well. For this next section, we want to go back to Cataclysm to talk about 2 very interesting tabards. The island, or islands if you want to be technical, of Tol Barad were added in Cataclysm as an open-world battleground and daily questing hub. Tol Barad was originally intended to be a sort of Wintergraphs 2.0, but its design and placement quickly left many players feeling less than fond of it. Through daily quests and winning the Tol Barad battleground, players can earn Tol Barad commendations. Upon reaching honor with the player's respective faction and earning 40 Tol Barad commendations, players could buy a special tabard. For Alliance, this meant reaching honor with the Baradins Wardens faction and purchasing the Baradin Warden tabard from the Quartermaster Brazy. For Horde players, this meant being honored with the Hellscream's Reach faction, purchasing the Hellscream's Reach tabard from the Quartermaster Pog. These tabards are useful because they teleport the player to Tol Barad, where there is a closed portal to their capital city. Since they are tabards, they can be equipped, transmogrified, and even placed in the player's action bar since it is a usable item. All this means that the Baradin's Warden's tabard and the Hellscream's Reach tabard are essentially teleports to capital cities. The only other similar items to have these are the 3 Guild Cloaks, which teleport the player to Orgrimmar or Stormwind. In fact, there is only one other tabard in the entire game that teleports the player, and this tabard is the Tabard of the Argent Dawn. For more information on useful teleporting items, check out this video on this subject, which will be linked in the video description below. Did you know there are 3 achievements in the game called Death from Above? The first of these 2 achievements are from the patch 4.2 Rage of Firelands. During this achievement, players must bomb 10 different fire elementals during the daily quest Fires in the Skies. Unfortunately, this achievement is not as easy as it may sound. Not only is this quest locked behind other dailies and requires some progression to Firelands campaign, but only 3 of the Fire Lords spawn each day, and they spawn at random. This pesky achievement is a criteria for the meta achievement Veteran of the Molten Front, which awards the title the Flamebreaker. The next achievement entitled Death from Above, interestingly, comes from the Firelands raid. This achievement is easy to solo now since it just requires the player to kill some adds in a specific place during the Bethelak encounter. Bethelak is a giant fire spider, so if you have arachnophobia, you might want to skip this achievement. However, this achievement is required for the meta achievement, which rewards the epic Corruptic Firehawk mount. The third and final achievement is from PvP. Added at the end of Legion, the Seething Shore battleground has players battling for Azeroth off the coast of Feralis. In this battleground, players start off flying on gunships and parachute down to the battleground. To get this achievement, you have to slay an enemy within 30 seconds of landing. This achievement is part of the meta achievement Master of the Seething Shore, which awards the title the Prospector. In the early development of the Cataclysm expansion, Deathwing was actually supposed to physically erupt from the ground to actually create the Cataclysm. This was later changed to Deathwing emerging from the Maelstrom, but there are several remnants of this plan still visible. The area where he was supposed to erupt was planned to be south of Dun Morrow, north of Stormwind, and to the west of the Searing Gorge and the Burning Steppes. In fact, there is even an early alpha map showing this new area. This area was going to become a new mini-zone where the actual entrance of Deepholm will be located. directly where Niltharagon was hitting his head in the cinematic. This mini-zone would have been called the Deathwing Scar, and the destruction of Deathwing would have been extended all the way to the Twilight Highlands. While most of this plan was abandoned early on, there is still quite a noticeable scar in the Badlands. In fact, this subzone is named the Scar of the Worldbreaker. So if you ever wondered why this scar was just limited to the Badlands, now you know. Following this course, it then makes sense that Deathwing would fly north over Loch Modan and fly over the Stone Rot Dam, breaking it in the process, which you can see in the Cataclysm intro cinematic. From Wetlands, Deathwing would enter the Twilight Highlands on his way to Grim Batol to capture Alexstrasza's eggs. In fact, he even bisects Grim Batol, which can be seen in the dungeon along the top of the map. The walkway throughout the dungeon is even called the Scar Terrace. So even though most of these things did not make it to the final version of the game, some early iterations and ideas can still be seen in several zones in the middle of the Eastern Kingdoms. There was a lot of cut content from Cataclysm, as you can see all in our previous video on the channel, which is linked in the video description going over it. There are many companions and battle pets in WoW, but among the rarest is the simple Firefly. This seems rather contradictory, and the story behind it is pretty fascinating. The Firefly Pet is learned from an item named Captured Firefly, and this item has a small chance to drop from bog flare needlers in the zone of Zangarmarsh and Outland. Oh, and when I say small, I mean very, very small, at a rate of below 0.1%. It is one of the rarest pets to obtain in the entire game. This is reflected in its price on the auction house, where on the NA realms it hovers around 500,000 gold. In fact, there are only 25 bog flare needlers in the entire zone, and they have a respawn timer of 5 minutes. All of this adds up to one of the worst grinds in the game if you want this rare and elusive pet. In fact, the item it drops from, the Captured Firefly item, had its quality changed from common to rare during the BFA expansion to better reflect the rarity of the drop. In the city of Orgrimmar, on the north side of the area called the Drag, you will find a shop named Droffers and Son Salvage. In this shop, you'll find a father and son orc who don't sell anything. These characters and their shop are a direct nod to the 70s sitcom Sanford and Son. In WoW, the orc father is older and named Dran Droffers, which is an anagram for Fred Sanford, the father of the show. Similarly, the son of the game is named Malton Droffers, which is an anagram for Lamont Sanford. Dran also refers to people as dummies, just like Fred does on the show. Perhaps the show is today most remembered for a running gag in the series, in which times during distress, Fred looks up, as to the heavens, with his hands across his chest, faking a heart attack and saying, "This is the big one, Elizabeth. I'm coming to join you, honey." But Lamont knows that it's merely a dramatic ploy. The Droffers also have some other interesting tidbits in the game. Occasionally, they will sell their wares on the black market auction house, truly proving that one man's junk is another man's treasure. Both Droffers have cameos in the horrific visions of Orgrimmar, in which Molton is carrying around a tire for some reason as a shield in order to protect the shop as it's being used to create a teleporter. And that's it for this episode of the Unknown Side of WoW. If you have any suggestions or comments on tidbits in these videos, or topics for any other videos, let us know down in the comments below. Keep being awesome, and we'll see you in the next video.